December the 5th, 1945, 5 U.S. Navy Avengers took off from a Florida air base on a routine training mission. But something went wrong. The tower suddenly received inexplicable radio messages. In a panic, the pilots reported they were totally lost. The ocean and sky appeared strange and unfamiliar. Then, silence. A Mariner rescue plane was dispatched to look for the missing flight. Suddenly, it too lost radio contact with the tower. In an area off the coast of America known as the Bermuda Triangle. Here, the Mare Celeste was found abandoned and huge cargo vessels had disappeared. Here, schooners and tankers alike vanish without trace. Military aircraft and commercial passenger planes fly into oblivion. The disappearances are apparently continuing today. It's reported that 4 boats and 2 planes a month set off into the triangle and never return. Since 1945, so the story goes, hundreds of ships and planes and thousands of people have mysteriously and completely vanished.
It may be that right here on the Earth, on our own Earth, quite close to the coast of the United States, something has happened or something is happening which sort of reverses the laws of nature with which we are presently familiar.
We don't know what it is. That makes it a mystery. We have not solved it. If we knew what it was out there, we would not have a mystery. You would not be shooting this film of me today, and I would not have written a book on the subject.
These waters off the Florida coast have been the graveyard of ships and planes in such numbers and in such strange circumstances that no rational explanation seems possible. Books on these disappearances are bestsellers, and if the story they tell is being accurately told, these are mysteries for which science has no answer. One of the authors is Richard Weiner, a deep-sea diver and sailor who's traveled the area extensively in his own boat. Weiner believes 3/4 of the disappearances can be accounted for by natural explanations, but 1/4 of them remain totally inexplicable. Charles Berlitz, who's written books on the Atlantis legend and other mysteries as well as the Triangle, believes the disappearances cannot be wholly accounted for by natural explanations. The triangle each author describes varies in size depending on the incidents they want to include. Indeed, some writers even stretch it as far as the Irish coast. But how did it all begin? Lawrence Cush.
The usual story is that this mystery goes clear back to the days of Christopher Columbus in 1492. In reality, it goes back to Vincent Gaddis in 1964. He wrote an article that was in Argosy magazine, and then he later included that as a chapter in his book. And this has been picked up by many people as their basis for the mystery. Now, what Gaddis did is picked up a number of articles like this Associated Press article in 1950, which by E.V.W. Jones, and this is the first mention of the Triangle as a mysterious area. An article in Fate magazine in 1952 added some details to these incidents. There are many other little ones, but the main credit for at least the name of the Bermuda Triangle and the concept goes to Gaddis.
After Gaddis came the books, all very popular and all telling more or less the same strange stories. Many of these same stories have also been told in a film made by Richard Weiner. Using this film, we looked at whether the mystery has a rational solution or not. This is the case of the cabin crew.
Father Patrick Horgan, a Catholic priest from Fort Lauderdale, aboard his cabin cruiser to behold the Christmas lights of Miami from a mile out at sea, a mile that was to stretch into infinity. At 9 p.m., Miami Coast Guard received a message from Burak, a mile off Miami Beach. The Coast Guardsmen reached the location given by Burak, but found only the buoy marked.
But did the witchcraft incident happen as it's usually told? Larry Cush.
Charles Burlett's account is similar to Richard Weiner's. He says the incident of the witchcraft is an outstanding example of lightning-like sudden disappearance of a small craft, not only within sight of its port, but while located at one of the harbor's buoys. The boat proceeded through calm seas to about 1 mile from the shore and stopped to admire the lights from the vicinity of buoy number 7. So we have here a very tranquil scene. Maybe they had their foot up on the rail looking over the lights of Miami. Now this is the article from the Miami Herald, December 24th. One paragraph says, "Stiff winds blowing from the north and northeast whipped the surface of the Atlantic into a carpet of foam against which a white boat like Witchcraft would have been well camouflaged." So what's interesting about this incident, which does sound mysterious as it's always told, are the things that have been left out. The most important thing that's been left out is that the weather was very bad.
Some of the books.
This is buoy number 7, a mile off Miami Beach, and these are the conditions that supposedly they were when the Witchcraft was lost in '67. Calm sea, nothing much to do but just sit around and admire the lights of Miami Beach. In reality, of course, we don't even know that the Witchcraft was here. There's nothing to verify that it was. The story is that the Coast Guard took 20 minutes to get out after the radio call, and we've sat here and drifted, and in just the space of a couple of minutes, we've drifted a good 100 yards. So in 20 minutes in a storm, there's no telling how far they might have drifted. The Coast Guard didn't even know where to go because they didn't know where the Witchcraft was. They never specified a position.
No report of the time stated that the Witchcraft was at a known location, and if it wasn't, its disappearance is that much less mysterious.
I wondered where this detail of the vicinity of the buoy had come from.
From the Coast Guard. From buoy number 7.
Mm.
This final message from it was released by the Coast Guard, although not released at the time, when Burak had apparently put through the first message to the Coast Guard, and the Coast Guard had to cut her out there in about 12.5 minutes to buoy number 7. He didn't say exactly what was wrong, but he just said he needed help. And when the Coast Guard cutter came there, and this is 1 mile from Miami, he and the yacht and his friend, of course, had disappeared. But there was...
The Coast Guard asked him to put up a flare, though, which suggests that they really didn't know where he was at all.
Well, it would have to be... this was pretty well examined at the time, and has been examined since. And of course, he was fairly near to Miami. He never showed up. I think this is one of the closest disappearances, besides the planes that have disappeared when they were coming in for a landing, of course.
In fact, the buoy 7 location came from Richard Weiner. Where did he get it?
They gave the distance from shore. I went out in my boat. I measured it. They set out from the inlet. And they had to be within 100 yards of buoy 7.
So the Witchcraft's position is only an estimate. It's equally possible that in the storm it had drifted miles away, which would help explain the disappearance. But such considerations couldn't, it seems, explain away the loss of the Japanese ship, Raifuku Maru.
But as the ship steamed past the Bahama Islands, the Japanese crew found that Madison and blaspheme also existed in the waters of the western Atlantic. For the last that was ever heard from the Raifuku Maru was the message, "Danger like dagger now, come quick." Then silence.
In fact, the last message was, "Now very danger, come quick." A ship answering this SOS actually saw the Raifuku Maru sinking in a raging storm.
His wife, daughter, and son-in-law set sail for Miami, 150 miles to the north. A course in the Devil's Triangle. As the year 1957 was ending, a massive search was beginning, for Revenant had vanished.
Vanished, in fact, in near hurricane winds in the worst winter storm in Florida's history.
I guess it was today's chuckle I saw once where it said that some people like to drink from the fountain of knowledge and others only gargle. And this is what's happening, is I think we're turning into a world of garglers who want to pretend like we're thinking very deeply, but we're really not. And to me, the tragic part of this is that most people are really not aware of this. Nobody ever considers the possibility of questioning these films and these books that they read.
But the general question remains, why so many small craft, about 100 a year, do go missing in this area? Part of the answer lies in the strange habits of Florida's boating population.
We regularly encounter boaters who call us and tell us they're in some nature of distress and tell us where they think they are, and we quite often find them as much as 40 to 50 miles away from the position where they actually think they are.
I've had cases of a woman calling me up and asking me where Bimini is. It's not on our chart. And I asked her, well, what type of chart are you looking at? And she says, well, I've got the dictionary open to the World Atlas. And she's going to sail across the Gulf Stream with the World Atlas. And this is a typical type call.
Now, first duty boat crew.
The United States 7th Coast Guard District, which covers the triangle, is the busiest in the world.
4 persons on board. Out. The 30-foot cabin cruiser, white with green trim, Bimini top, Florida numbers.
Each year they get 10,000 calls for help. So if only 100 out of this 10,000 do go missing, the Coast Guard reckon this is a really small percentage.
Over.
Actually locating the people in difficulties is a major problem. Sudden storms can blow up in these deceptively calm waters. The positions reported to the Coast Guard searchers can be miles out. Many of the people they're looking for are simply not equipped for the conditions they meet.
Quite a few of the boaters do not compensate or overcompensate for the Gulf Stream when they're traveling from the mainland to Bimini or vice versa. And they wind up missing the island, and there's very little out there in the way of land masses for them to hit. And they keep drifting at a nice steady 4 knots per hour, approximately 6 miles. Every hour they're moving 6 miles in a northerly direction. If the person is not located, they can very easily become lost east of Miami and wind up in the Jacksonville to Savannah, Georgia area. This is a good day. We're running about 2 to 3 foot seas, and we'll run a 2-mile track space in a search for about this altitude, 2 to 4 mile track space. The white caps, the garbage in the water are all very confusing to the searchers. And we're looking anywhere directly below us to a mile out, so normally the possibility of finding somebody is about 10% or less. A person in the water presents about the same size as a soccer ball or basketball. So picture trying to see a soccer ball in a farmer's field at 500 feet doing 130 miles an hour. That's the difficulty in finding a man in the water. A lot of it's search plan, but a lot of it's luck when you actually locate somebody.
Such factors make the loss of numerous small vessels understandable, but they don't explain the much larger disappearances in the triangle.
Two KC-135 stratotankers took off from Homestead Air Force Base on August 28, 1963. These were the first 2 jet aircraft to add their names to the ambiguous chronicle of the Devil's Triangle. 11 crewmen were aboard the 2 planes. Their destination when they lifted into the sky was secret. The last position they radioed was 300 miles southwest of Bermuda. Then they vanished.
Whether this disappearance is a mystery depends on what piece of evidence you accept. The first report stated that wreckage found from both planes indicated a mid-air collision. The two planes had been flying west when they vanished. The first wreckage was found here, but a day later, more wreckage was found 160 miles away. Most writers have used this second report mentioning two crash sites to argue that the planes had mysteriously crashed independently.
Well, the telling of this mystery is fairly uniform throughout most of the writers. Gaddis says the obvious explanation was that the tankers had collided in the air, but 2 days later they found the second wreckage, and he ends up saying what happened remains a mystery. Weiner said that the wreckage from both locations was definitely ascertained as being from the two missing planes. Berlitz says, again, the same thing. The two spots of wreckage, it's inexplicable. It just cannot be figured out.
So the mystery hinges on whether the second site really contained debris from a KC-135. Charles Berlitz says it did.
I believe among the old junk was found wreckage from what was apparently the second plane, including a lifeboat.
However, another report a day later stated that the second wreckage site was simply seaweed, driftwood, and an old buoy.
Oh no. The second wreckage was wreckage. It was picked up by a ship. A Coast Guard cutter picked it up.
I have here the report of the Air Rescue Squadron of their search mission, and they point out that at the first area of wreckage they found serial numbers from a number of things like life vests, helmets, radar receivers. A large amount of wreckage was found at the first spot, and the serial numbers on this wreckage, the different devices, showed that these were parts from both planes.
This report seems to clear up the mystery. The debris identified at the first site from both planes backs up the initial reports of a mid-air collision. It underlines that the mystery had come about because the wrong report was used as evidence.
Had the incidents all happened like everybody said, then we would have had a mystery, but the fact that in case after case I found the incidents didn't happen the way they said, things had been omitted, they'd been added, distorted and changed, and there is nobody who is saying that there is a mystery in the Bermuda Triangle who is basing this on good, accurate information. All the people who say that there is a mystery out there are basing that on very inaccurate, distorted information.
But logical solutions to this and other triangle mysteries are still challenged. Couldn't the authorities be covering up the real facts? Doesn't the sheer number of cases point to something strange?
Some of us think that it has to do with magnetic fields in the area. We know that there are magnetic anomalies. We think that these magnetic fields, for some reason, are concentrated at one part of the Earth in this Bermuda Triangle. And they're brought to such a field of such a power of concentration that planes and ships and even people that go into them or sort of stray into them eventually encounter the anomalies that I've discussed up to now, and they may be strong enough to actually change the composition of matter. In other words, change matter itself into another dimension.
There are other theories. Time-space warps, UFOs capturing the missing vessels, a power source from the lost continent of Atlantis sucking them into the depths. All of them based on the premise that the disappearances are so mysterious that some strange force must be at work. Theories of inexplicable forces are then used to explain cases like the Star Tiger. This British airliner disappeared in 1947 on a flight from the Azores to Bermuda. To this day, no one knows what happened to it, and as no wreckage was ever found, it's not difficult for writers to suggest it was somehow spirited away.
Now, a lot is made in the case of the Star Tiger, the fact that no wreckage is found, yet they ignore the fact that this did occur at night. The weather was bad at the time. They didn't know precisely where the Star Tiger was when it went down. The search planes didn't actually get out there for 5 or 6 hours, and by the time it was daylight, it was even longer. And many people overlook a very elementary fact that an airplane is not a boat. And it's just not a mystery when nothing is found from a plane that ditches out in the ocean.
There remains a mystery, though, as to the reasons for the crash itself. The official report suggested various mechanical failures, but came to no firm conclusions. One line in the report, however, that some external cause may have overwhelmed man and machine, a reference to the weather, was used by implication to suggest, for example, interference from flying saucers.
Suppose, for instance, that I said, I have proof that a parrot was kidnapped by an extraterrestrial and is being held captive to teach the extraterrestrials earthling language. And I challenge you to prove that that's not true. And I even allow you to use Einstein's theory of relativity if you like. But there is no way that you can prove that that is not true. So when we have somebody who's telling a story, you just cannot prove it's true. So I think it's unfortunate that all it requires for something to become part of what we call the mass public mind is all we need is for somebody to suggest it or ask the question. You know, could it be that Rhett Butler is still alive and well, living in Ohio somewhere? There is the burden of proof should be on the person who says that to prove that it's true, to show where he got his information.
I think enough things have happened in the area to indicate that there is something wrong with the area. This is a general knowledge among pilots. Of course, pilots who tend to avoid parts of the area, of course, you don't know where the danger points are because it's sort of sporadic. Pilots who avoid it don't think they're going to be pursued by monsters, but they do know that their instruments go off.
The U.S. Coast Guard ship Hollyhock suffered such an instrument failure. It wasn't particularly special, but in the triangle, any incident, however small, can be made to seem mysterious. The Hollyhock lost radio contact with the Florida coast, but strangely could pick up California.
Mark, radio tower 267.
It also picked up a land mass on radar when there was no land for miles. Understandable or inexplicable?
Well, if they can't explain it, a mystery is unusual. It doesn't happen every day. It doesn't happen every time they go out. It may happen to a vessel out there, a Coast Guard cutter, once a year, twice a year, maybe once every 4 years to this particular ship. It was rather strange because they don't know what caused it, and that makes it strange.
Coast Guard officer Wisman told the Hollyhock stories to Richard Weiner. They certainly happened, but did he suggest they were unusual?
This isn't particularly peculiar. We just came back on another trip in the area. We were on the north coast of Cuba, and we could talk to the Coast Guard station in Mobile, Alabama, and we still couldn't get a hold of Florida. So it happens, particularly at night where the atmospherics change. So it's not a strange phenomenon at all.
Well, I admit, you know, it is strange, but not unusual. And it is unusual, but it's not that supernatural or anything, because they don't know what it is. Did he explain to you what caused it? He said it happened all the time, but I want to know what caused it. What caused his radar to show a landmass where there wasn't a landmass? That I want to know.
As far as the landmass on the radar, I would say it's not peculiar either. Many times rain squalls, rain clouds or something like this, sea conditions can look like land the further out on the radar that you get. So I would say that's not peculiar either.
So the Coast Guard say these are normal phenomena, and but for the triangle, they'd pass unnoticed.
It's a known fact.